Good morning. Thank you so much for being here so early on a Friday morning. Thank you, Celie, so much for inviting me. It is an incredible honor. I think this is an incredible community of people who are coming together all around the world talking about just really interesting topics. I've really enjoyed the time that I've come, and I hope that I can share something with you this morning. I want to apologize at the very beginning. I have a potty mouth, I'm really sweary, and there are a couple of slides that you definitely wouldn't see in Singapore if you were looking to change in Singapore this morning. I'm really sorry, I just can't not do it. Oh my God, okay. I was going to say I'm Canadian. I'll come a little bit later to why I'm not anymore. But anyway, I'm originally from Canada. I grew up in Ottawa. My parents were civil servants. This is the obligatory snow photo. This is my sister and I on top of a really big ass pile of snow in front of our house. I think we didn't have a snowblower, but the Walkers next door had one. I think Mr. Walker actually did this for my mother because she probably would have had a nervous breakdown. We thought this was the best thing ever. I graduated from the University of Guelph with a Studio Fine Arts degree. I realized upon graduation that I wasn't going to be able to support myself as an artist because I really just didn't have the temperament, sort of the drive to get out there, nor did I want to rely upon the Canadian government for grants. This is me in front of a really bad painting. I have binders and binders of slides of really bad artwork that is essentially 4 years of art therapy. I think of this as my year of ennui sandwiches. I have dyed black hair that is crimped to an inch of its life. And those eyebrows are, I can date any photograph of me of pre-plucked and post-plucked eyebrows. So just know these are like the caterpillars. When I first moved to the United States in 1990, I couldn't work. I had a visa that didn't allow me to do anything. It was pre-NAFTA. So I had a little bit of money and I bought myself a Mac 2 CI and a color laptop. I got Photoshop 1.0 and Quark, and I taught myself graphic design. It was really interesting. My former husband was in the graduate program at Princeton School of Architecture, and through him I got to meet a lot of artists and architects. I've worked with Diller Scofidio on a couple of their books. I worked with a number of different architects around New York, and eventually was sort of brought into the fold at the School of Architecture as the special projects coordinator. And I remember like kind of the day that changed my life when the dean kind of swaggered in and it was like, Heather, there's this thing called the World Wide Web. And I was just like, okay, what's that all about? And for me, it was really the beginning of my love affair with the internet and life online. Celie mentioned I had a project that started in 1999. It was called the Mirror Project. It was about reflective self-portraiture. By the time that it sort of wound down in 2006, we had over 3,000 photographs from people all around the world who were sort of sharing these photographs of themselves 300 pixels wide because I was paying for bandwidth in the days before, like you may remember what it was like. And I actually got stuck with some really brutal bandwidth bills. I don't know if you remember K10K. They linked to it one day, and I think Derek will remember me like bawling my eyes out because it was like me trying to negotiate with DreamHost to like cut down the thousands of dollars of server bills that I was going to have to pay. Derek and I co-founded JPEG Magazine, which was a sort of our love affair with photography, and we really wanted to take photography from offline back online. And sorry, it's early. I haven't had enough tea. Online, offline, and it was at a point when just-in-time publishing was at a point where it was kind of feasible, and so we started publishing this magazine featuring the work of photographers that we really liked. I worked in New York, Montreal, and San Francisco as a web designer in those places until 2005, and 2005 is kind of when things began a major shift for me. I joined Flickr as the first post-acquisition hire and led the community team. When I first joined, there were like 17 million photos, and 5 years later, when I left, there were 4.2 billion. So that kind of gives you an idea of the growth. I worked on a lot of the different projects that kind of were implemented in that 5-year period. I co-wrote the community guidelines and codified a lot of sort of the policies and process around abuse and advocacy. This is a picture from my desk. There are two things that I love about this photograph. One is the quote from Louise Bourgeois from a piece of her artwork that is, "I have been to hell and back, and let me tell you, it was wonderful," which kind of pretty much exemplified what was going on. And then this little fellow is, he's the tequila gnome. He started out life as a paperclip holder for Ross Harms, who was head of front-end engineering, and I loved it so much. And I was like, "Ross, if you ever get rid of that, I want it." And he kind of looked at me like, "I have no idea, you're a crazy person." But 6 months later, I think he decided he didn't want this. And so it came and sat on my desk, and these little bottles of Jose Cuervo tequila fit perfectly into the baskets. And so this, for me, was how I dealt with things really going wrong. And so because this photograph, there was one missing, you know that I've had a really bad day. And essentially what would happen is, this is the time when Carol Bartz was the head of Yahoo, and she decided that she wanted to implement a concierge service. And that meant that if somebody kind of went to her office and was complaining about something, I would have to talk to them on the telephone. I was like, "I really don't want to do this. We've got really great member support. I can tell you all I know what's going on. We're dealing with it." And they're like, no, you have to take these calls. I think on this particular day, there was a gentleman who was very upset about his account. And I said to the person who was dealing with concierge service, "I don't want to talk to him. He refuses to flag photos of his naked self for adults only. He won't do it. He just won't do it." And they're like, "I'm sorry, you have to take the call." So I get on the call, and essentially all he wants to talk about is like, "Oh wait, are you the person who is dealing with my account? So you're the person who flagged my photos? What do you think of my penis?" I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, are you really serious?" Anyway, so we had this long conversation. I think I got off the phone. The great thing about these little tequila bottles is you can just pop the lid off and have a quick shot, and your day kind of gets better. I still have the tequila gnome. So this is kind of a really good example of kind of like how kind of to treat yourself well and alcohol may not be your thing. It's my thing. I don't know where these little people came from. I'm really sorry. I suddenly looked at this photo. I was like, who gave me those? There's got to be a story, but I don't remember the story. I probably blocked it out of my brain. I was just like looking at them this morning going, wow, that's really inappropriate. That's like a lot of stereotypes going on there first thing in the morning. So I've also, after I left Flickr, I have led community at Findery, which was Katarina Fake's next startup, working, and it was map-based storytelling. And then more recently, I led the community team at 53, which is a drawing app. Derek and I have co-founded a online community consultancy that we've called Fertile Medium, and I suddenly realized that pretty much the last, 11 years of my career, I have only worked for companies that have start with F. So I'm not sure what that's about. Is that me?
I don't know. Let's try talking into it so we can turn it down.
I thought it was like a boiler or something. Awesome. Can I put this back? And through consulting, I've had an incredible opportunity to work with companies like Tumblr, Etsy, Lytro, and Snapfish, sort of on change in their community, how they will work through problems of going from one thing to another. And it's something I'm really passionate about. So we've had a couple of really big life changes myself. A year and a half ago, Derek and I moved here from San Francisco. We live about 30 minutes south of Portland on 2 acres. We have 3 dogs, 5 goats, and about 23 chickens. 7 of those chickens are hens, the other are chicks. They're really poopy chicks. And I absolutely love Oregon. And though I don't understand why everybody always talks about the rain, they should really talk about how big the spiders are, because oh my God, the spiders are I'm horrified by the bugs here. And I guess I recently experienced the biggest change in my life as I became an American citizen on March 1st. And I'm so excited to be to vote for the first time in a really long time. And the other exciting thing is I became a citizen the same month as Fabio. So I was reading online, he became a citizen on March 16th. So I feel we're kind of twins in some way. He's got better hair though. So I must confess, I was a little freaked out on March 1st when I sort of woke up and I went to the CreativeMornings site and I saw this beautiful artwork that Victor Brigante made for change. It's all the things we want change to be. It's sort of this beautifully paved road into the future full of color and delight. And I've been thinking about this as the happy rainbow change. So when Silly first talked to me about change, this is kind of what comes to mind. This is how I've experienced a lot of change, or in terms of in my career, how change comes to me. So this is something that a member of a site that I worked on uploaded after an update. Right? This, I think, speaks a lot of how we feel about change. And I think, you know, the issue is change is going to come whether we're ready for it or not. In many instances, it makes us feel absolutely out of control. Though the more change we experience, the more we're better able to handle it. But getting to that point can be incredibly difficult. So I'm going to talk about my first real experience being sort of on the finger side of change. So this is Tigger. He was my very first Chihuahua, and he was absolutely made of muffin. He's like the best dog ever. I just love this dog. So Tigger, like many pets at the time, had his own profile on Friendster. I was more invested in his profile than in my own. He had so many different dog and cat friends. He was really popular. They all knew he was made of muffin. It was just a beautiful time. I woke up one day and his and thousands of other pet profiles were gone. They were just absolutely deleted. It was like scorched earth. And what happened was that Friendster had decided to change their terms, and they did so overnight without letting anybody know. So I was absolutely heartbroken. Like, how could you do this? And like the darker side that pulled out of the story, he had passed away some months ago. He'd been attacked and killed by another dog. So for me, this was like doubly really hard. It's not to say that you can't make change if you need to make significant policy change like this, but this is absolutely not the way to do it. Something I think a lot about is community goodwill. I think what a lot of people don't understand is it's a finite, precious resource. It's not this eternal flame that you can burn through as much of it as you want to. It's something that we all have a different burn rate, and based upon our experience and what's important to us, it'll either burn through like a wildfire, like it did for me with Friendster. I was done. Or it's like a slow burn, right? And you reach a point where people are like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. So here's a recent example. So I just kind of put this kind of in perspective. So this, I guess last week, Instagram announced that at some point in the future, they're going to start making changes to the way we see photos, what the order is in our stream, because 70% of us aren't seeing the things we are supposed to be seeing. So I read this and I think I'm doing it wrong, right? So already I'm being put in a position where I'm doing something wrong. When I heard about it, this isn't how I found out about it. It was like through something on Twitter. So I'm seeing somebody's take on this issue in 140 characters on another site altogether. Heather of 10 years ago probably would have dealt with this differently. You know, 10 years ago, I worked in an office in New York where one day I walked in and a desk that had been a member, like the member of my team, not only had he moved to another team, they had just totally moved his desk as well. So there was this big empty spot in the office where he had been, and I like totally burst in tears. I'm a bit of a crier. You know, now I kind of step back and kind of see what's going on. And I have like, I start building a checklist in my brain of like, okay, how is the community going to respond to this? So here we go. And as I'm sort of going through last week, there was protest art. This is how a lot of people found that this change was going to be happening. I think yesterday there were over 32,000 posts that had been made with the Keep Instagram chronological tag. There was a petition, which I kind of sometimes wonder if change.org needs a sister site that's don'tchange.org, because we periodically see a number of this petitioning system being used. But look, there are over 200,000 people who have signed this petition. Like that's okay. They may consider that to be a fairly inconsiderate, a small number of people. But these are some of your most passionate members of your community. These are the people who your sort of Instagram really matters to them. So for me, this is kind of heartbreaking. There was a boycott. We always see boycotts, right? So this was something that I see flowing through. While I didn't participate, I actually saw different people that I really respect who use like artists and illustrators and designers and small shopkeepers participating in this. I don't know what the impact was, but like in seeing it, like people I have a lot of respect for actually participated. Then you usually get to the step that is the workaround, right? Where people kind of figure out something's going to change. So what can I do to deal with it? You know, people they see the blog posts, they see the protest arts, and what they see from that is they don't take the message like, you're going to see the stuff that's really important to you that you didn't see. They took away from this, people are never going to see my posts again. And so their reaction is, please turn on notifications. And I don't know about you, but it's like, oh, hell no. Like I have very few notifications turned on. And I don't know. Like a lot of these were small business. This is just a sample. There are many of these. But I think the saddest thing is the game of telephone that takes place when this kind of information comes out. Essentially, the post says in a few months, and essentially this is going through saying is no longer showing you. So it's already happened in this individual's mind. This is already going on. So this is like within the last week and a half. This is kind of like very top of mind for me. This is a change that's going on, just watching and seeing how people do. So lest you think I'm standing here in my glass house chucking bricks at Instagram, I'm more than happy to share with you a couple of ways that we implemented change poorly, or I have been a part of change that was implemented poorly, and kind of what we learned from it. So, and I realize that this is going to look like I'm hating on Instagram. I don't have as many screenshots for some of the things I'm going to talk about. It's sort of in the past, and a lot of those things don't exist anymore, sort of in the landscape. So I think this, if I kind of look back over my career, this is the biggest flaming pile of crazy that I didn't, that kind of like that we failed. And so when Flickr first launched in 2004, you created an account and you signed into that account using an email address and a password. Yahoo acquired Flickr in May of 2005, and it became clear really quickly moving forward that we would have to move to a system where people would need to sign in with Yahoo IDs. This would become important later for internationalization and some various other things that were going on. So in August of 2005, the process changed, and any account created from that date on used a Yahoo ID to sign in. So we announced the change on a blog post, and the short version of this was, I should step back a bit. So the people who were kind of early adopters, who had created accounts from when the site launched to this point in August 2005, sort of self-identified and created their own moniker called Old School, and that was SKOOL. And this was kind of how they referenced themselves. So when we announced it in the blog post, pretty much what we were saying was, hey, Old School members, don't worry. You don't have to do anything right now. You will at some point, but we'll let you know when this happens. And then what we did was we waited. And we waited 18 months. That's like a year and a half to do it. And essentially everybody forgot about this, right? Everybody forgot. There was no, looking across this landscape of hundreds of thousands of accounts, millions of accounts at this point, you couldn't tell from the outset if one person was an Old School member or if one person was like a new member. It's not a visible thing. We didn't identify them. Some of the people did themselves. They added Old School to their screen name or they put it over their profile picture. It was like a badge of honor to be this early adopter. So how was this change received? So we announced it in February of 2000, and so would it be 2006? And we announced that as of March 15th, Ides of March, who would pick the Ides of March as a day that you had to do this? I don't know, it was kind of bad from the outset. As of March 15th, you are going to have to associate your account with a Yahoo ID. And if I had to pick just 2 words, I would say shit show. Like this was a shit show. So this is a screenshot from the help forum. Each page would paginate when there would have been 100 comments. At this point, and this isn't even at the end, at this point there are 29 pages, so that's close to 3,000 comments that have been made. This itself has turned into its own little mini FAQ, because who in their right mind, who suddenly has an opinion, gets this page, sees 29 pages and yeah, I'm totally committed to reading all 3,000 before I ask my question. That's just not gonna happen. So we turned it into a mini FAQ where we could deep link into places where if Stuart had said something really, that this is what this means, we would link into it. But if you ever saw this, you would know that this was just something was really mismanaged. And I think kind of, if we move forward, what do we learn from this? So there are going to be times you are absolutely going to have to introduce policy change. I think the thing that was so key was rip off the Band-Aid, right? For a business decision or whatever you're going to have to do, something has to change. Don't wait. Announce it as clearly as you can. Be really specific about what's going to happen. Give them a very specific date that's probably about 6 to 8 weeks out. And then if it's a site where you collect data or information or content, give them an elegant, easy situation where they can just take that and go. So, and the other thing is we should never underestimate people's emotions around their identity. Even if it's completely, if we think we know what's going on, you have no idea how people feel about this. And the other thing about change is, and I think this is really hard for a lot of people, is that you don't have to be, nor should you be, everything for everybody, right? It's not possible. And so I think some people are going to decide that they aren't interested in continuing the journey with you, and that's totally okay. Just give them a way to move on. Have a happy parting. Just don't make it like the bad ex you never want to talk to breakup because they're going to badmouth you forever. Make it no, we went out to dinner, it was all good, here's my stuff. It's in a way that you can use it elsewhere, move on. And I think, so this was really important. And this started to impact a lot of the ways that we were doing things. So what came after that was video on Flickr. And so this was something when Flickr launched, it was you could only at that point upload photos. They were actually really small photos at the beginning. It took a long time before the photos got bigger. I remember very early on, we want to have video. From the very beginning, we want to have video. At that point, video was still very difficult, it was very expensive, and it took close to 3 years to happen. We spent a lot of time beforehand thinking about this. We had a private group where we invited people to come and to begin uploading content. We could see how they reacted, we could see what they said, we could make changes. There were I think we changed the time because they were very short videos. it helped us kind of form the messaging, how we spoke about it, and it gave us a lot of really excellent content when we launched, so we could show people like, this is what it is, right? This is what it's gonna be. We did as much as we could to really make it a comfortable place. And what was really interesting is these are protest photos of people who were incredibly upset because they saw this change to their landscape as something that was really dangerous. Like the fact that like some dude had a gun, I was just like, okay, this is like, I'm not sure about this, but this is just, there were thousands of these. You didn't have to, it's not like we were driving around to everybody's house and saying, I want you to upload a video to Flickr. It didn't autoplay. If you never uploaded it, if any of the people you followed never uploaded, you wouldn't know it was there. We added a filter to the group that if you didn't want people to upload video to the groups, like we tried to be as respectful as possible, and still people were upset. And what was really interesting and what came out of this was that we really began to see that change has a life cycle. And sort of in the first 24 to 48 hours, people are just responding to the fact that something has changed. They haven't tried it, they haven't seen it, they may not have seen it. They're just like, oh my God, there's video on Flickr. It's like probably, this day, like in these days, it would be like, I heard in 140 characters on this third-party site that this thing has happened that's really important to me. Like now, it's just this change. And then 48 hours on, you start seeing feedback where people may have taken a time to experience it. They have more thoughtful feedback. This isn't to say that you're not going to get thoughtful feedback from some people early on. It's just really harder to see sometimes because the signal is just like, the noise is way higher than the signal. Really, in that first 24 to 48 hours, I think a lot of it is you can't just step back and let people freak out. You need to kind of be present. We're listening to you. You don't have to say, we're going to make changes. Don't do that. That's the worst thing you can do. Like unless, rolling back unless things are falling over is really difficult as well, because sometimes, like, oh, we're going to roll back. It's like you've just rolled over and shown your belly, and it's like they'll have you the next time. Well, if you did it the last time, you can do it this time. So that's really dangerous. So I think this is something to be aware of, and it can be really hard. I don't know if you have experience of being on kind of the side of this intense emotion coming through. It's really important that everybody on the team really support one another, because it like sometimes people say really horrible things. Like emotions these days, you can see, like anytime that you spend any time anywhere online right now, emotions are high. It's, people seem to be pretty comfortable saying really mean things to people they don't know. That's a whole other conversation. We can't do it at Creative Mornings because there are no mimosas here. That's my suggestion. It would be mimosas. But so this is something to think about, right? Is to like be present, really take care of yourself, but kind of you will get through to the other side, and it doesn't go on forever. And eventually, it will kind of come down. And it was always interesting to me, the people who are like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. I had to stop one of the people on the team from like, no, you can't send them an email congratulating them for uploading a video. That's not allowed. It's not like we're keeping a list of these sorts of things. I think one of our most successful launches at Flickr was when we launched geotagging. It was something that we spent a lot of time on. It was like photos on a map is you're starting to get into location data and privacy information. We thought really hard about geofencing, so you could really identify, like, don't ever show on a map anything within this X mile radius because this is where I live. Like we thought a lot about this. We spent a lot of time. One of the Anna Zavala, who was in our support team, created these incredibly beautiful screencasts that were really short. One was how to do it, how to view the photos on the map, how to add your photos to the map. We really kind of spent the time really making sure that everything was buttoned up, right? Like this is super important. We don't want to let people down. It's everything from the beginning to the end. And so one side of that preparation is kind of worst case scenario planning, right? How are all the ways that people are going to start messing with what you build? Like recently, that Microsoft bot Tay. I don't know if you have been reading about the terrible, horrible things people do to 19-year-old female bots on the web is just kind of mean, but like people love to play with things, right? That's it. That is just, it's human nature. So this, was something that we really thought long and hard about, and one of the things we thought was, okay, like what are people going to do? They're going to build these enormous porn islands that are like that Texas garbage island. That's going to be the thing, right? That's going to be the thing, and suddenly, people are going to start sending URLs of like, you can go here, and it's like porn island. So 24 hours later, this is a heat map. This is a internal view of kind of what was going on 24 hours after photos geotagging launched. And Sergei Morchov, who absolutely brilliant engineer who was the author of Explore, sort of that algorithm as it kept changing, sort of came up to me, and he's very thick Russian accent that I'm not going to emulate, but it was like, Heather, have you looked at Greenland? And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's not the porn island. So I look at Greenland, and somebody's taken the time to place 82 photos on the map. 82, I counted them. I very specifically counted them, spelling out a bad word, the bad word that I'm going to say. And so, though not change, I thought you might, this is like surprise and delight. When people talk about surprise and delight in community, this is kind of what they're talking about. So really, a little bit worst case scenario planning, change is coming. How do people respond? How can we, in advance, really be prepared? Like the worst thing that can happen is change comes and you sit on your hands for 2 days and you don't respond, and the story takes on a life of its own, and it's gone. You're never going to get it back. So these are, and then always expect the unexpected. You just don't know. Like you can do it, just be okay with the fact that at some point you're not going to be able to control it. So why is change hard? Michael Shermer coined the term patternicity, defining it as the tendency to find meaningful patterns in meaningless noise. We make up stories, and we do it more when we have less information. So whether or not we have positive or negative ideas about the pattern we see depends upon our state of mind at the time, right? Something's changed. Is it a bug? Am I the only one who sees this? Did I do something wrong? When you make change, you need to give people lots of information about what it is. You really don't want to leave them in a situation where they feel like they're the ones who did something wrong. If we go back to Instagram and the upcoming timeline change, we can see the stories that began making up. And unfortunately, they're not really good. So if we think about this, right, the information that we give people, I hate this so much. This is the thing that drives me absolutely crazy. I just, people are getting better about this, but I think, unfortunately, for us, sometimes we think, oh, this is, it's really small. We don't need to say what it was. Or maybe it was really big and we just don't want to oh, hey, yeah, we were leaking your credit card information. But, that's like, if we're in a negative state of mind, when we see this, maybe, were they leaking my credit card information? There's been a lot of that going on. What's going on? Like this, what do you see, when you see this? Maybe I'm just worst case scenario girl. I've turned off automatic updates because it's like, no, I want to see what you're doing before you do it. But don't do this. We're better than this. So I think it's really important to remember that this is all still very new. Mistakes will be made, and I think communities are surprising. We're so, humans are just such fragile beings. I think if we do our best to demonstrate our respect to the community by sharing information in context at the right time, we can make this happy rainbow change. But better yet, we'll have that community goodwill when we need it. Thank you.